organized and kind of, oh, I'm going to say this. It was all like a perfect spreadsheet in my mind. This morning I'm chaos. So if you'd rather go and do a bit of gardening or something, you've been warned. So anyway, a very, very warm welcome to all of you. I think everything's okay. Just let me check. I've got a feeling my settings aren't all good. Oh, that's good. Okay. Okay, Eva, have a good morning. And so, Linda, good morning too. Okay, let's get going. So, you know how we start. We have a lot to do today. Today, like all these Saturdays, is busy. But I have to put a lot of discipline into not rabbiting on because there's so much to rabbit on about today. So that's for the rabbit bit, and I'll try and be more disciplined. Let's start with our excellent motivation from the heart, loving, caring for all fellow sentient beings, in particular those who are part of our lives and our karma. So it's very, very important to feel that we're here for them, but here for everybody in all the different types of existence, all the different worlds, and to love them with all of our care, and to be so happy, so truly happy that we have Dharma. And that is today's topic. When we get there, we've got to finish forbearance. But when we get to diligence, it's exactly about that, being happy that we have Dharma. So let's do a few prayers and really try our best to have a sparkling, happy mind, caring for everybody. Sonje chodon soji chonom la jancho bado dane chapsanje dagi jinso jipe sonamje trola penchara sonje drupare sho semchen tamche dewa dang dewe jodang dempare choche dongal dang dongal ji jodang chalware choche dongal mepe dewa dampa dang men tralwara joche. Nyeren jadan netan tralwe, tan yong chempola, ne para joreche. Deyata shame shamavati shameta shachum, am kure marajite kayori tejuvati oloya nebeshuda nemale malapanaye. Kukure kaka grase grasana o muki paramuki amuki shamitane sawa graha bandana negreheta sawa para pravadina vimukta marapasha satapita buddha mudra nugatita sava mare butsarita parishude begat santu sava marakama. Alen sawe lama rinpoche, dagye chewara pende denshola. Kadren chempo gone jesonte, kuson tuji madrot sadhu sol. So thank you so much. And today is a special day in the Tibetan Buddhist calendar. It's full moon, so the full moons are always special practice days anyway. Usually the moon days, full and new moon, are practice days, not because they're auspicious, but because they are days traditionally or energetically, according to the inner study of our body's energies and the cosmic energies, they're days of difficulty. They're days of, and then when we look at the circulation of our inner prana, then it's in the head on those days, and that can cause troubled feelings. So that's the reason we pay extra attention to our Buddhist practice, generally on the moon days. Today we celebrate the Buddha's entry into his mother's womb. One thing. We also celebrate our great lineage forefather, Khenpoken. And in particular, just now through these 6 Paramita teachings, we are really following Khenpoken's teachings. So when I said I'd like to rabbit on, those 2 topics could have a whole session each. Buddha's entry into the womb, into his mother's womb. But let's hope he enters into our room as well, and our chat room. And so, I mean, it's just fascinating. It's fascinating. There's the external side, which is researching, the sutras, the Pali Canon, the Mahayana Canon, seeing what was the original story, how it developed, where do we get our information from, which is mainly from a text called the Lalita Vistara, and so on, about the Buddha's entry into the womb and his time in the womb, his actual birth, and then his mother died 7 days after his birth. So the historicity of that and the scriptural side, the external research side, is really very, very interesting, but much more. All of it, when we go back to the stories of Buddha's past lives and the promises his future mother made, the promises he made, and so on and so on. When we look at whatever the historical and the scriptural side is, because the Lalita Vistara, although it's one text, is actually a compilation of many sources of Buddhist knowledge, treated as one text, treated as one sutra, as what the Buddha told Ananda. Ananda was his main disciple. So complicated. His main disciple, but it was Ananda's mum who became Buddha's wet nurse when Buddha's own mum died 7 days after he was born. But anyway, all of that, it's worth a session in itself. The inner story is just amazing food for reflection, because it's about the birth of, or the awakening of Buddha nature in our mind, how it starts, and how, the actual story in the Lalita Vistara is like Immaculate Conception. A supremely sublime divine force comes into the mother's womb, and from that time until birth and her death, she's in a state of bliss and purity and so on. So the fact that it's not worldly is about how in our stream of consciousness, in our karma, there is something other that comes in, which is our Buddha nature's influence, and how that's nurtured and so on. How Buddha's mother was called, strange coincidence, great illusion. How our Buddha mind is born from great illusion, and how then there's the death of the great illusion, and so on and so on. There is so much deep, deep meaning. But anyway, today we celebrate it, and on a very general level. If that never happened, then we wouldn't have the Buddha's teaching. Also, in Mahayana, we think Buddha achieved enlightenment in the highest possible state of awareness. It's called a kanstha. And that from there, he showed like a theater, being born, renouncing the world, going to meditate, achieving enlightenment. He showed that in many thousands of worlds at the same time to help establish the Dharma. So anyway, there are levels upon levels. Although the Buddha's mind is in the highest state of awareness, it shows being in the Bodhicitta paradise on a relative level, and leaving there, empowering Maitreya, coming to this world when 5 things were just right for him to come. The time, the place, the actual location within India, his mother and the disciples ready to come to him and so on. Anyway, we won't go there any more than that. We're celebrating it today, and it's a powerful day. The other thing is Gampopa, who was the highest level of Bodhisattva, served so many thousands of Buddhas in the past, and who came into our lineage to really establish it on all levels of Dharma, bringing in the monastic purity, the Bodhisattva teachings, and then the wonderful two sorts of Vajrayana teachings from his Guru Milarepa, the path of liberation, the path of skillful means. So it's a very, very special day, and it's a great pleasure to teach on this day. So anyway, let's return to the teachings and about forbearance. And we've seen that the essence of the forbearance is not to be disturbed, not to be upset by anything. That's the definition. It's what we're aiming for. Nothing will be able to trouble our mind in any way. And the real meaning of peace is the opposite of this. Of course, when we start to meditate, we meet states of peace where you can disappear into an artificially created area of your mind and experience great, well, nothing happening really. I suppose that's what peace is. So there are all sorts of levels of that peace, but it's artificially created by concentration on something. The real meaning of peace that the Buddha attained wasn't some state, because that would be some state as opposed to all the rest. Buddha was at peace with everything, with himself, with his history, with his own mind, at peace with samsara in all of its manifestations, at peace with the bodhisattva task, at peace. Where whatever comes, with no exception, so it's all embracing, the Buddha's mind is never troubled. That's what we are aiming for, to be wise, to be peaceful, to be compassionate, whatever happens in our bodhisattva activity, in whatever's left of our own karmic manifestation from what we've done in the past. So that's what we are aiming for with forbearance, not to be troubled. And so last time we looked at some aspects of it. Today we'll look at the three main aspects. I need to give you the structures for you to remember, please, and then for you to explore in the backup literature. So we have three areas where we're learning not to be troubled. And we're learning it in the only way a bodhisattva can, hands-on, dealing with the trouble as it comes. It's the only way. So as I mentioned last week, once we've got the spirit of that correct, then although we don't go looking for trouble, we are happy when trouble, I mean trouble in the sense of something troubles your mind. It can be your own thoughts, not trouble from outside. But anyway, when trouble comes, we welcome it because the opportunities to develop the strength of forbearance are rare indeed. And they get rarer and rarer. So when they come, we're very happy for them. So trouble comes in three areas. One is it comes from what in our mind is not us, from the outside, and in particular from other people in life circumstances. So trouble from the outside, and as I mentioned last week, we don't have time to explore the amazing teachings that help us deal with that. The ninefold way from Shantideva's tradition and the fivefold way from Asanga's tradition. They're very nicely explained in Gampopa's teaching. Gampopa's blessing is in his own summary of those, so please check them out. I talked a little bit about that area of dealing with trouble that comes to us. Now, that trouble that comes to us is, of course, through our own karma. our own karma, sort of. I mean, who we were when we made that karma isn't who we are now. That's the irony. It was in past lives, maybe long ago past lives, when we were somebody so different. But nevertheless, the stream of consciousness is such that when karma is made, it will stay with its doer until either it's purified, and we can do that, but if it's not been purified by practice, then it will come up one day or another when it's triggered. What will trigger it? So say I made karma with you, and then we don't see each other for 50 lives. But then we end up in a life where you turn up again. You'll be the trigger that awakens whatever karma we had between us, beautiful, positive Dharma karma, or difficult human problem karma. So it's our karma, but when we look into karma, we see there's no question of guilt or deserving it. It's just how it is. It's just how it is. You put a seed in the ground, one day or another when it's watered and warmed, it comes up as the plant that it is. Rice comes up as rice. A flower comes up as a flower. You can't change that. So how to deal with that, very, very important, is in those two main Mahayana streams of teaching. But let's move on to the second area where we must learn not to let our mind be troubled. And the general title of this is not to be troubled by our own suffering. We can take it generally, we can take it to mean our inner difficulties, sometimes that our own body karma brings to us, or our mind difficulties, where our mind has baggage that's not very pleasant, and we need to deal with it. So we can take that generally as mind or physical suffering and facing that. So we can't really say this is coming from outside, and those 9 and 5 sets of teachings, they are about mainly coming from the outside. But this second area particularly involves the suffering that comes through our practice of Dharma. If we take the vivid classical example of Milarepa, he did one of those things that we do sometimes, which is he made a very extreme promise. So he was sent to meditate. And when he got there, he made a deep promise, I'm not leaving this place until I'm enlightened. Well, you know what it's like in a moment of inspiration, you really mean it. And it seems like, yes. But then there's the reality. What happens if you don't leave this place? Where do you get the food? Nobody there. He's in an absolute wilderness where barely anyone ever comes. And so on and so on. It's a place with a wretched winters, but he made the promise. And so he ends up eating plants and nettles around his cave door. He looks very, very strange by the end of all of that. But it's a promise he's made. And for his Dharma practice, then he undergoes a lot of hardship. More generally speaking, it says it's the hardship of having to beg your alms and live the life of a monastic or renunciate and so on. There are many levels, but we must expect our Dharma practice to be challenging. I think I mentioned it last week, but it works like this. The more intensive your Dharma practice, the more your past challenging karma is brought up to be dealt with. If you didn't practice Dharma, then there is a natural sequencing of karma. It's self-programming. It's like all your karmas are in a queue, and the strongest ones come to the front, and these ones get pushed a bit back as new ones come in. It has its own natural order that will come life after life. But when we practice Dharma, the power of Dharma in our mind, and in particular, if we have a connection with gurus and the lineage, the power of the presence of our guru and our lineage will rearrange your karma. If you're looking for a good time, this isn't very good news. You might want to forget Dharma and just say, oh, when it happens in another life, too bad, or another 50 lives in these terms, you might. But that doesn't help in the long term. In the long term, you'll suffer more. No doubt about it. So we want the karmas that need to be dealt with to be brought forward, so that now, while we're human, while we have the blessing, while we have the motivation, while we have all the tools that we've been so graciously given, also by our past karma, we want to deal with stuff now to get rid of it from our mind streams so that our mind can move on. When we look at the path of Dharma and how we can progress, you see, it says in the teachings, for instance, that you can't advance to this level of awakening until all your karma from the past related to killing other beings intentionally has been purified. So if we want to break through to that next level of awakening and purity, then those karmas have to go. So in general, the suffering that arises through our Dhamma path is something that we welcome. Easy to say. When it happens, and it does happen, I've spent a lifetime witnessing this, sincere Dharma people who then, the karma switch goes on and life becomes interesting. And it can become very, very interesting. I often share in these talks one of the most vivid cases, which was a guy who was a very good friend of mine and who came to Samiling to end his days. Young, he'd been a university teacher. He was a philosopher. He taught Wittgenstein and Buddhism, this kind of thing, wrote books. Then he got MS and he deteriorated quite quickly, and he came to Samiling to finish. And as his body went down, and it really went down, and we used to take turns to go in and help him, his mind got brighter and brighter. And I remember he could barely speak because of his MS. And he said to me, you know, Ken, this illness is the best thing that ever happened to me. And he explained his mind was so happy and free, and that he could have spent the rest of his life just being a university, blah, 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 talker, researcher, book writer. People went to see him to help him, but they went to see him because you went away feeling blessed. So anyway, I think you've got the idea. Dharma practice can bring its own difficulty. So in the text, it says, we welcome this and we're very happy to go through it. And then it gives some medical examples, two kinds of medical example from Tibetan medicine. So we don't get these too much these days. Bloodletting and moxibustion. So I've seen both. And the bloodletting, you do it with a bucket and a scalpel. And it's quite spectacular. You have to get the bucket in the right place, because when the blood pisses out, it really does. And makes a bit of a mess. And it's quite spectacular for the person who's having it done. And the other is moxibustion. Well, there are various levels of moxibustion, from just holding warm things close to special places. But there's also what's called white hot iron moxibustion, where you actually burn the flesh. I've seen that too. In fact, I've helped for that to happen. Remarkable. Somebody who had 2, 3, 4 very serious epileptic fits every week and suffered enormously from it, who had 3 on 3 key points on the heart center. We had to hold her down, of course, while it was happening, but she was free from epileptic fits for more than a year afterwards, could drive a car again, could do things. It was amazing. But anyway, you got the idea. You're willing to go through that because of the outcome. Because of the outcome. So with Dharma, difficulty, we know where we're going. Enlightenment, a free mind, a peaceful mind, happy mind. So we welcome the difficulties. That's our second area of forbearance. The third area in the long term is the most important because it's the key to the others. And it's our forbearance or shunyata, of the truth of voidness. Fortunately, at the very beginning of these Zoom talks, I gave this series on voidness for dummies, because, voidness is very much misunderstood. It's not some kind of other great cosmic vacuum, where we disappear sometimes. Excuse me, I'm going off into the void, back in 10 minutes, and sort of gone somewhere else. It's the truth about the void nature of everything. It's not somewhere else, some state. Every single moment, just now, of our existence, until we're Buddha, as long as our relative story goes, every single moment is not what it seems. It's an illusion, like a dream, like a mirage. We get these, we don't have time, but these 8 wonderful examples that Taisattupa gave us in recent talks from the Manikambum, written by the first Tibetan Dharma king, Sensum Gampo, about how things are illusion, how the bodies we experience, our own body, other people's bodies, are like the emanations of Brahma, about how the environment that seems to be out there and have its own reality are like the cities created in Gandharva's mind, spirits, and how things are like a mirage, they're like a dream, they're like an illusion, and so on. So to realize not just that it is illusion, which is already a big realization, but to understand the karmic causes and conditions which are happening to you right now through your own stream of consciousness to make you have the world you experience. So to see through the illusion and to understand it is voidness. Now, what does this mean? Turn that, what I just said, around, back to front. It means that on your Dharma path that you've signed up for, you must expect, one after another, your illusions to crumble. And because Dharma programs itself so beautifully when we keep our samaya and connection, the stronger you get, then the more you'll be able to deal with your deeper delusions, the whole story of who you are, the whole way you've understood other people, your parents, the people in your life right now, your own karma. It's enormous. When that work's done, you're Buddha. So we welcome the crumbling of illusions. It's a strange process. It's got a kind of a rhythm to it. I don't know if you know Indian music, like a raga. and how they start off slow and then they gradually build up. They get incredibly excited and then come to sort of a conclusion. As the illusions are brought up, delusions, then it's nerve-wracking, it's scary, and we cling to it. We've clung to those illusions because that's been us, our mind, the way we've constructed reality to survive. So we don't want to let go. So hard to let go. But because of all the blessing in our Dharma practice, somehow we do face it. And we kind of break through. It's like planes breaking through the sound barrier. You know, they get this incredible resistance. The closer they get to the speed of sound, and poof, all of a sudden they're through. And when it's over and the delusion's shattered and you find the truth that's on the other side of it, you're so grateful to everything you've done. Sometimes we can't make it. Sometimes we see the delusion coming and we feel like we can't cope with it just now. That's fine. Then we take a few steps back. We become stronger. We develop all the right qualities. And then next time, maybe we can face it. But once, and you know, it's so hard because we're on a path. The first times this happens is the hardest. Once you get used to the program, to the process, then it's like, you know, getting used to going to the dentist. You know, the and all of the open wider, I'm just going to give you another injection and all of that stuff. It's painful, but you're so looking forward to having nice teeth again. And so there's a kind of, oh, here we go. Here comes another delusion about to crumble. All right, bring it on. Here we go. And you put on your Dharma bulletproof jacket and you go in there. But then, you know, afterwards, yeah, did it again. You know, great. It's a process. So anyway, this third area is about shunyata. Now, also, you know, it's troubles on many areas there because it takes a lot of meditating, a lot of patience because some of it's so boring. And sometimes we touch something so deep and then 2 weeks later it's gone again. We can barely remember it, except we know something very deep happened and we've got a mental facsimile of it. It's a long process, takes so many years, no matter how hard you meditate. So anyway, forbearance of all the trouble, the retreat, the psychological difficulties of breaking through one illusion after another. But when we do that, of course, when you break through delusion, what's left is truth. And the more that this deeper truth through shunyata meditation, voidness meditation, Mahamudra meditation is there, then you've relativized so much the persona you had before that when life's difficulties come from the outside, your shunyata inside is a real strength for not getting embroiled in all those worldly circumstances and for not getting embroiled in self-pity. Remember last week we did the various variants from anger to self-pity and depression and so on that we're dealing with forbearance. So when we have the shunyata inner center, the calm, and not just the calm, but the calm that's blessed by the whole of Khenpoken's lineage. You feel your guru, you feel the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the refuges. Then that makes such a difference in dealing with life's problems that your karma brings on screen. Through the practice of, and then the last, let's go through the technical points I have to deal with. As with generosity, as with right conduct, it is only the paramita of forbearance when it is great and when it is pure. Remember, it's made great in three ways. It's made great by jnana, which makes it nobly great, primordial wisdom, by praja, which makes it so vast in its goodness, and by dedication. And it's made pure by the joint power of compassion and the four seals of voidness. Only the moments that have all of those, the greatness and the purity, are the moments of the paramita, of forbearance, that really take you out of samsara forever. So when we have been practicing more and more moments of the paramita of forbearance, then there are two types of consequence. Ultimately, that is what will take us to enlightenment. And as Bodhicitta said some months ago, in the Buddhas of the past, the recent past, then in the 6 past Buddhas, then 5, then one of them, mainly through the practice of forbearance, achieved total enlightenment. So that's the main target, the main outcome of our forbearance paramita. In the meantime, and so helpful to our journey as a bodhisattva, the practice of forbearance brings you good entourage, companions, life circumstances, environment. Practice of generosity brings you a good rebirth. And practice of right conduct brings you a good body, good life, good health. Practice of forbearance brings you good entourage. So now today we've got to move on to diligence. So there's so much more to be said about forbearance. It's so deep. And I hope you get the chance to read more, learn more. Maybe we get the chance, or you get the chance with somebody else to explore forbearance, and especially the 9-fold method and the 5-fold method, and that you actually practice one or the other of those. For instance, in the 7-point mind training. So we saw that forbearance is giving us the power to cope with trouble, things that trouble or might trouble our mind. So now we move on to diligence. And remember, the paramitas go from more obvious to more subtle, from easier to practice to harder to practice. So when we are practicing forbearance of difficulties, I'd like to add something. So this is a footnote. I'll pick up that sentence halfway through a bit later on. Okay, a footnote. You'll find in Tibetan Buddhism prayers and expressing the wish, may obstacles not come on the Bodhisattva path. Right? You might have seen those. There's lots of them. There are whole practices dedicated to that. So what are obstacles? Now, this isn't a sort of get out of jail free card for bodhisattvas, where you say, please, please, Buddhas, refuges, give me an easy life, one without the obstacles, and so I can just sit on my butt and practice and meditate and say nice prayers for everybody and just be a glowing bodhisattva. They aren't obstacles. If the outer things, people trouble, life trouble, body trouble, health, dharma trouble, where your mind has to struggle to stay afloat and so on. If they were the obstacles, Buddha would have been a failure, because he had 3 cosmic eons of bodhisattva practice, right? Yet in his last life, he still got hassles. 2 assassination attempts. His whole Sangha ripped in 2, and in fact more than half carried away by his jealous cousin, Devadatta. Calumny attempts, and so on and so on. So what happened to his bodhisattva path? Did all of his prayers for getting rid of obstacles not work? Huh? How many hundreds of lifetimes was he praying for there to be no obstacles? Was he a bit of a failure in the prayer department? Or what? Think about it. Obstacles on the bodhisattva path doesn't mean obstacles coming to you. It means obstacles in you in dealing with them. You forget the teachings. You don't apply the teachings. That's the obstacle. You can't be thankful to your enemies. You can't be thankful for your physical suffering and illness and appreciate and so on. And so we go into self-pity, or with enemies, we go into anger and aggression, or wishing harm to come to them, whatever it is. The obstacle is in losing the practice. So our deep prayers, and many of them, for obstacles not to appear on the bodhisattva path, mean that we willingly take everything life throws at us as our path. We don't see anything that happens in this relative world as an obstacle, except an inability to apply Dharma as best we know it. Anyway, that was the parenthesis. And so now diligence, how comes it's so deep? And what is it? The word I use, diligence, to translate what is in Sanskrit virya, diligence. I don't know how it resonates in your head when you hear, like if Lama said to you, be diligent, how would you interpret that? I think for most people it means kind of work harder, put your shoulder to the grindstone, and so on and so on. It's got those senses. But the definition that we get from the Prajna Paramita, from the Paramita teachings, and that khenpoken gives us, puts its finger on something so amazing. The key is like Milarepa's song about the Paramitas, puts its finger on the key. You see, diligence, as a word in English, has its root in diligere in the Latin, and it means to delight. So the definition of diligence is to delight in Dharma. Now, I'm not sure how good you are at delighting. Do you delight very much? And what makes you delighted? Funny word in itself, because light's nice. When you get delighted, I don't know quite what that means, but anyway, delight, delicious, means there is joy. Now, what is the key, the secret? When you enjoy something, when you enjoy doing something, you find energy. You can't get enough of it. You're looking for, because you like what it brings you, the results. So you want more and more and better. And people doing what they like. Or I'm not sure about this because I'm not a parent, but like kids, just when they can do what they like, they find a lot of energy. And when they have to buckle down to what they don't like, I think it's losing energy, but I don't know about that. But often I think people look at kids and think, what's the secret of all that energy? When you get to my age and you kind of like this, and you think, what's the battery? What's the inner power? But generally in life, kids are not. Then when we love something, then the energy comes. And when we're forced to do what we don't want, we can get more and more tired, more and more depressed, more and more despondent. And of course, we see this in life all around us. We have to work. What's that Beatles song? A man must break his back to earn his day of leisure. I remember when that, I was a boy in those days when that song came out. In the UK, people had usually 2 weeks annual holiday. They worked 50 weeks a year for 2 weeks. And anyway, let's get back to the point, which I just lost. I had a blank. Never mind. So when you've got the delight, you can't get enough of it. When you don't like what you're doing, you're forced to do it, then it drains your energy, and you find whenever you can an excuse to do something else. I think we Buddhists often think of our meditation cushion. If you manage to get to sit on it, you're so grateful at the end of the session. But there's a kind of an energy field around it, which reminds you of other things you need to do. And, but I must do this, or I must call this person, or, but the supermarket's going to close in half an hour, or there's this kind of energy field which is full of excuses. And when we break through it, then we're okay. So resistance, excuses to do other things, which are more, delightful, more pleasant. So what the Buddhas have understood, what Khenpoken has understood, is that now we know what our Dharma practice that we're forbearing is about. Facing our own illusions, dealing very positively and intelligently and calmly with life's problems. If we can find joy in that, not only will Shunyata help us to practice it, but we'll be able to do it much more. Now, this is the next word, effectively. So when we think of the Paramita of Diligence, we've got joy and effectiveness. So now we come to the way we approach all these paramita. What are the faults of not having diligence? What are the benefits of having it? If we don't have diligence, then the fault is we waste time. Now, in most translations of the Tibetan for this, Lalo, you'll find laziness. Laziness is part of it, but it's much more than just laziness. The real meaning, and I had some tussles over this when we made this version of Khenpoken. I worked with the Dalai Lama's translator, Geshe Thupten, and I wanted to say time wasting for Lalo. He wasn't happy. He said, no, it's laziness. And he said, no, it's laziness because that's what he's heard all the time. He's always used it. He never thought about it. We had a real row. So anyway, now time wasted. This life is so precious every day. This precious, we call it a most precious human existence. Once we have Dharma, every day, every hour, every moment can be turned to practice beautifully. But through the power of our karma, we have resistance. So we can waste this precious time. No, waste it. Waste means like it goes down the toilet, it goes down the drain. Waste. It goes in the bin. And you can't go back and recover it. Every moment wasted is gone. It's one moment less of your human life. So this is deep because it's about efficiency. I mean, efficiency we talk about in business and in engineering, in science. But it's once we've realized it's all about my mind, your mind. This mind is going to purity, liberation. How most effectively, most efficiently to do that, because it's in everyone's interest, especially my own. And we see that time wasting happens so much every day. So how to stop wasting this beautiful, rare, like a star in the daytime, human life we have. So it says the fault of not having diligence is that we waste our time. The benefit of having diligence is that then our practice becomes more and more effective, and we shall certainly and as quickly as possible attain the various levels of freedom, liberation, wisdom, love, compassion. So now that's the benefits and the down and the shortfalls. So then the next thing in these teachings, we think, well, what is time wasting? And Gampopa explains through the sutras that we waste our time in 3 areas. This isn't our big threefold division for the Paramita diligence that we have with the previous ones. We're not there yet. We're looking at time wasting. The first one is laziness. So there we're into laziness, and it's where we love idleness. In one text, it has quite an interesting definition. It says idleness can be horizontal, or 45 degrees, or 90 degrees. So horizontal is spending a lot of time in bed and asleep and just enjoying wasting so many hours of each day. So as we had already in right conduct paramita, then the Bodhisattva tries not to sleep in the first and last parts of the night, but to devote them to practice when the day's activities are done and then before the day's activities start. So there's horizontal laziness, there's 45-degree laziness. I quite like, in a humorous way, this one, because it means you're kind of lounging, You're lounging in a bar with a glass of beer, or you're kind of laid back and taking life easy and having a chat with somebody. And then there's vertical laziness, which is the same thing. It means it doesn't just mean sleep. It means that we can be wasting time. And so then, well, we're quite far into the paramitas. I think it's better that through your own practice, mindfulness, and observation, you examine yourself, as we're supposed to do every day, and to find what is a vertical or a 45-degree waste of time. A lot of human life is the stuff we enjoy. Chatting, idle talk, interesting stuff. How much useless, interesting information we know. Do you know that the Galapagos turtles have a lifespan? Oh, really? No, I never heard about that. But you make me think of, well, all those voyages of Cook. Now, Cook was an interesting, oh, really, an interesting person. Oh, tell me about him. What do you know that I can then pass on to other people as more of the interesting information that I can share? Because, well, actually, the truth is I don't quite know how to be silent with other people, and they don't know how to be silent with me. So we've got to talk about something, and interesting stuff makes life, kind of interesting. We can waste time very, very nicely. And watching TV, it's amusing. It can be quite exciting. But I mean, in the end, did it do you any good? Did it do your mind any good? And even if it was an interesting documentary, is that really going to help you help others, as opposed to something else? Only we can do this for ourselves. It's very hard to be a bodhisattva and a yogi in the modern world because people think you're mad. You've lost interest in life. what it's all about. Here in France, they're interviewing people because they stopped the lockdown. People were going to nightclubs again, getting drunk, getting mad and dancing around, and sweaty bodies. And they're saying, this is what life's all about. And there's Ken there listening, thinking, is it? It's what they've been waiting for. It was a great sort of, this is really living now. So we have to examine this for ourselves, how we waste time horizontally at 45 degrees or vertically. We become mindful of our body, speech, and mind. And in fact, if you do have to talk with the neighbors, because that's part of being a kind neighbor, we learn how to talk with the neighbor and hold a conversation, but our mind's not drawn into it. We're practicing shunyata. We understand interdependence, loving kindness, non-involvement of ourselves. And we're thinking, if I can make this person happy for a few minutes, mind you, I will excuse myself after 10 minutes, but if I can make them happy for 10 minutes, if only I could bring happiness. Our mind can be a Dharma mind. But if we just let our mind get drawn into the local gossip and other things, then that's not a Dharma mind. And we've wasted our precious time. So skillful means kindness, we don't turn around to our elderly parents and say, you're just a delusion and I'm wasting my time by doing this with you and talking about what was on the TV series that you're passionate about. We practice loving kindness, care, make them feel loved. But our mind does not need to be involved in the grip of it. We can practice Dharma within the relative world. So the first way we waste time is laziness. That's the most obvious. The next two are much more interesting. So the second one is, are you ready for an English word? Pusillanimity. Pusillanimity, which means a weak mind, which means a lack of self-esteem in the Dharma sense, whereby we underestimate what this life of ours could be doing. Now this is big, because most of us, we just grew up. I'm me. I'm Ken, who was the little boy Ken, who grew up, and all the rest of it. To think that actually I'm a bodhisattva, to really believe and see it in your mind. I'm going to be Buddha. I'm going to help on the way to being Buddha hundreds, thousands of other people. I'm going to be so pure and happy inside. It seems like too much, like a fairy tale. We have to change that. Our bodhisattva prayer, our bodhisattva promise is about changing that motivation. Remember when we did bodhisattva aspiration, and then now we're in the practice, the paramita, but the aspiration is getting rid of that weak-mindedness where we still think of ourselves as ego, who we were, the person. Here we need a strength. We're coming to that soon, I hope. The strength of knowing, no, I'm a bodhisattva now. All that's finished. All that's finished. So we remind ourselves again and again of where we're going and how we're getting there. And every time we find ourselves just sort of brought down to low expectation, thinking that a little bit's enough, or just kind of keeping our Dharma practice ticking over, there you don't have diligence. A lot of it is related to low self-esteem in the Dharma sense, where we're not esteem our bodhisattva potential, our Buddha potential enough, and we are estimating too heavily our historical person. So that's the second area where we waste time. It bears a lot of thought, a lot of reflection. This paramita is deeper than forbearance, so deep. And then the last area is more obvious, is where you have the enthusiasm, which is one of the translations of this word, virya. Lots of people say enthusiasm, joyous enthusiasm. I don't like the translation enthusiasm because usually enthusiasm in human beings is short-lived. People get enthusiastic for a day or two, but it's not something that is a constant and growing quality. So anyway, we can have energy because we have enthusiasm for harmful pursuits. So we often find that whatever's harmful, harming ourselves, harming others, we can really enjoy it and can't get enough of it. So if we find that we've got a delight in doing something which is doing no good, it doesn't have to be harmful in that sense. It's harmful because it's wasting our time. You know, maybe, for instance, even though you're not a kid anymore, you're a Lego enthusiast, and you've just finished building, a 500 square meter Lego reproduction of the Taj Mahal. Great, and you find the enthusiasm because you think, if I can do this, then what's the next one? We can find such energy for things like that. But let's bring it more closer to home, because I'm sure most of you aren't Lego enthusiasts. But samsaric pursuits, gardens, houses, home decoration, so many things. We need to find the balance. We need to find what needs to be done. But if you really believe that you're on the way to being a Buddha, to help everybody, and that every moment counts, then in order to be more efficient, we will need not to prune the roses so much, but to prune our time in the garden and snip that off, and not to redecorate every 6 months, but maybe every 6 years, or whatever it is. So they're the 3 ways we waste time. Diligence is the opposite. So it's learning to take delight in virtue. And here we come to our definition of it with all the paramitas so far, we've had 3 main areas of. So we have 3 main areas of diligence. Diligence, delighting in virtue. The first one is called armor-like diligence. Armor, like a suit of armor. The second one is called applied diligence. And the third one is diligence as insatiability. Imagine that. In the past talks, it's all about being satisfied with what you have, except for Dharma. Now we're going to become insatiable. This ancient karmic quality that we've had of never having enough and always wanting more, we can rechannel now into Dharma. More, yeah, better, improve. Anyway, 3 areas. The first one is very, very important. It takes us back to aspiration bodhicitta. It's called armor-like diligence, like armor. I was thinking the other day about the knights of old in their suits of armor, and I was thinking the images we generally have can't be right. Because if you've ever seen the weight of those suits of armor, they wouldn't have gone around the country, riding a horse every day in those hot, sticky, heavy suits of armor. They would have put them on to fight. Of course, that was their job, fighting when the time came. But I think when you imagine the fairy tales and the knight turning up in their shiny suit of armor, it really doesn't make sense. And I'm saying that because the bodhisattva armor Beware all the time. While he was alive, towards the end of his life, Akon Rinpoche had some very serious, what do you call them, threats to his life. And so one thing that we got him was body armor, because he was under serious threat. But body armor is quite heavy, and if you travel in it every day and everywhere you go, it's not convenient. And so, because I was the researcher, I found that for about £4,000 or £5,000, you can actually get bulletproof shirts, and it's woven from the material. It's like spider's webs. It's incredibly high-tech material that will stop a bullet and will stop a knife. So this is what country presidents wear all the time, because you never know when the assassination is done. This is more like the Bodhisattva's armor, your spider material bulletproof shirt. So this armor we wear all the time, and it's an attitude. It's incredibly important. It's a life changer. It's the attitude of a thought, the certainty that, based on the certainty that I am on my way to enlightenment. I'm going to become Buddha no matter what, even if it costs me my life. So it says, I will not drop this bodhisattva attitude for anything until I reach enlightenment. That's the armor-like diligence. It's a state of mind. Nothing's going to change it. From now on, for the rest of today and tomorrow and every day of my life and every future life, my mind is the bodhisattva mind. That's who I am. I'm not Ken anymore. And the journey will be like a battle. Karma will come on like enemies. My old ego will come on with all of its tricks. It's survived up to now. So crafty, so clever. It will come on like a most skilled fighter of an enemy. And whatever comes on that battlefield, I'm going to remain wearing this bodhisattva armor. Like when Akon Rinpoche was murdered. He was stabbed more than 50 times, and yet he didn't retaliate. He told his two companions not to retaliate. He stayed in the state of prayer and love and compassion. He lost his life, but he kept his mind. That is the Vajra-like bodhisattva armor. I will feel nothing but love and compassion and kindness and forgiveness and practice wisdom. And I came across, after his death, I had to give a teaching in Samileng. I came across some recordings of his teaching to people doing the Nyungne practice after Tibetan New Year in 1992. And it was hair-raising, because he almost described the circumstances of his death. He said, if somebody is there killing you and it hurts so much, nevertheless, you wish nothing but good for them. You remember beings in the hell realms and how you're lucky because you'll only die once, but they die and they're resuscitated and they go through the same thing again and again. You wish in future lives, through this connection of the person who's killing me, can I meet up with them? Can I liberate them? The Bodhisattva way. What an amazing example he gave us, not something out of stories and the scriptures. This happened in our lifetime. So diligence, whereby we won't waste our time, is to put on this armor from now until we are free and we don't need it anymore. It's very, very, very important. If you put that on, you won't waste your time. Then the second area of diligence is called applied diligence. And we saw in right conduct that there are 3 areas of right conduct. So it's those. We are going to be diligent in our right conduct of 1, getting rid of harms, no longer harming ourselves or anybody. That's one area. We apply diligence to that. Second, the right conduct of developing virtues in ourselves, all the good qualities of meditation, loving mind, and so on. We become diligent in doing that. And then third, special skills in the right conduct of skills in helping others. So diligence as a paramita, it says in the analysis of the paramita, is different from the others. Because the others are something you can do. You can actually deliberately sit down and do them. You not necessarily sit down, but you can be generous. You can go and practice generosity. Practice generosity. You can practice right conduct in those 3 areas. You can practice forbearance, because when the trouble comes, then you can feel yourself second by second putting it into practice, so you don't let your mind be troubled. But you can't just all by itself say, I can't tell you, okay, let's sit down and be diligent. You can't just be diligent. And so when we come to the next paramita, meditation, you can meditate, sit down, meditate, stand up, meditate, and you can cultivate wisdom. You can do that. So diligence is not a thing in itself that we can do by itself. It's the way we do all the others. We can be generous diligently, practice right conduct diligently, be forbearing diligently, meditate diligently, cultivate wisdom diligently. So it's a bit different. It's a sort of an inner quality. It's called a friend in Tibetan, a friend or a support for all the others. So first area of diligence is armor-like diligence, this attitude. Second, applied to those 3 areas, getting rid of the harm, developing qualities, helping others. Then the third diligence is called insatiability. And so this is an interesting form of laziness. I must confess to this one myself. We've all got our own problems, and one of Ken's problems is this one. It's resting on your laurels. I've got amazing karma. I've had, don't know how much longer I've got, but this life I've had amazing karma. Inside myself and in what's been brought to me as blessings on the outside. An amazing life. And so you tend to take that for granted, and you're in a nice place, so you kind of cruise. You're on cruising altitude. And, things are going pretty well. And life's good. Dharma's happening well. It's a delusion that we need to break through, because this life is so precious every day, and we've got so far to go. Sometimes people, when they have their first deep meditation experiences, wonder, am I enlightened now? Am I Buddha? Or is that first Bodhisattva level? They sometimes even go and ask their teacher. We are such beginners, such baby Buddhists. And when we realize the beautiful path that lies ahead of us, that most human beings don't even know exists, then we find that joy, diligence, delight. Now, this is horrible linguistically. You might want to close your ears. But if you want something to remember the essence of this teaching by, it's one word. And like I say, I'm embarrassed to say it as somebody who likes language. Delightigence. Delightigence. But there, you've got it in a nutshell. So it says, If beings in samsara can't get enough of samsaric pleasure, which is like honey on the edge of a sharp blade. These days they translate it as razor blades, but I'm not sure they had razor blades in the time of the Buddha. But anyway, you know what you think of when you think of a razor blade. But it has like a very sharp sword, incredibly sharp sword. And you put honey on the edge and you lick it with your tongue. Well, we've become very good at licking honey from sword edges. But, you know, if ever the sword, if ever it misses, then it's very dangerous. So it says in samsara, people are striving for the pleasure that comes at a high price and with a lot of danger, where things go wrong and they get hurt, they hurt other people. If beings in the world can't get enough of that, then how much more so should a bodhisattva want more and more and more of what is good for me, what is good for everybody else. So we don't rest on our laurels. And there we find the other sort of sense of diligence, applied diligence, where we need to put our shoulder to the grindstone and try a bit harder. And I think, you know, as time goes by, your Dharma practice, you get the feeling of when you are cruising and not acting efficiency, and when you could put a bit more effort in and achieve more. So thank you very much. There, I think we need to stop for this week. There'll be more about diligence next week, so we can finish off. Let's dedicate for the benefit of each and every sentient being, in particular, that each and every one of us finds the real meaning of forbearance and diligence, because then our lives will be so, so beautiful. Expressions of Dharma. Sonam diye tamche zikpani topnenye pedranam pamchene jega naji palav trukpaye sipezole trova trovarisho janchob semcho rinpoche maje panam jejoche yepan nyampa mepadam komne kongdu elwarisho.